This is the Big O Show. This is the Big O Show.
Right, we're ready to rock. There he is, the man, the myth, the legend that is Ira Winderman. How are you doing, sir?
I'm doing good. I mean, after all year of you chasing me across hotels around the country and catching flights, this nice break of 2 games in 8 days. I know if it feels this good for me, I know for Jimmy Butler and his ankle, for Kyle Lowry at 35, PJ Tucker at 36. This is the perfect reset opportunity, Big O, before the final dozen games. Get another week off before the playoffs. The schedule is set up very well for the Heat. You and I, basically since the schedule came out in August, talked about the hellacious first half of the season. Just survive. It'll come around. 7-game homestand completed tonight against the Thunder. If they win tonight, they go a healthy 5-2 on this homestand. So setting up nicely for them. It's just what looms at the bottom of the East playoff race that's going to be fascinating.
Well, and I would imagine the MO is no Butler today, right? Because Western Conference team, not important. Why play him? He's coming off an ankle injury. We don't even know if he's healthy enough to play anyway, as it is. I would expect that Jimmy Butler, unless he's close to 100%, why the hell would he play today?
You know, Eric Spoelstra never will say this, but I honestly think there also is some Big O of looking at the opponent and saying, you know what? We don't need our best players to beat them. No offense to the Thunder, and if Shai Gilgeous-Alexander plays, you know, he's a terrific player. But that's not about it. Giddy, the rookie who's been terrific, is already out for them. So they're shorthanded. I think Eric Spoelstra just goes through, okay, it's almost like when you fill out your all-star ballot. I can check these 5 boxes and also win. So I think not only might Jimmy sit tonight, I could see PJ Tucker sitting at age 36. Again, next week you have an interesting schedule. You have the 76ers in Philly on Monday. I'll talk to you on our Acura Pembroke Pines report before that. Then you have the Warriors, yes, without Steph Curry, but there's still plenty of talent on that roster coming in on Wednesday. Then you have Brooklyn next Saturday. So this is an exhale time for everyone. So it'll be interesting, even with 2 days off before and 2 days off after, to see how Eric Spoelstra approaches this.
When we look at the whole Strus situation now, obviously one hell of a performance the other night, blowing up. What are you hearing? Are there any more changes looming? Do we see some of these guys getting more and more playing time on the I guess because of Duncan Robinson's struggles or up and down play?
Well, obviously, if Jimmy doesn't play, that probably means they go back to number 1, Gabe Vincent starting, and number 2, Max Strus getting sort of the scoring guard minutes. So in the short term, they can fill him in there. You know, and we spoke about this, you know, on our Inside the Paint show on Wednesday, you know, from Slomin's Home Security, and we've spoken about it in our Acura Pembroke Pines reports. Eric Spoelstra has changed his lineups before in the playoffs, and it could be matchup based. And it could be that if you're hosting a Nets team with so many scorers in the first unit, that you may want to get a little more defensive, and maybe you do move Duncan Robinson out. I don't see that. Matter of fact, I think there's 2 primary questions here, Big O. Question number 1, what will the Heat do with the playoff lineup regarding Duncan Robinson? And question number 2, will Duncan Robinson be back next season? I think there's a greater chance of moving Duncan Robinson in the offseason than necessarily shaking things up with him right now. I think they might lose him. Because let's be honest, Big O, some people are wondering, might they start Tyler Hero? While I don't think so, I can't tell you for sure. If you start Tyler Hero in place of Duncan Robinson, I'm not so sure that Duncan Robinson gets to play at all. I'm not so sure that Duncan Robinson isn't bypassed. The better reserve might be Max Strus. So all of a sudden, from going from a top 5 starter, he might go from 10th man. And I know this isn't a factor, they say, but it's a lot harder to trade your starting shooting guard and get value, or at least unload his contract, than the guy who was 10th man in the playoffs.
Amen.
Perfect example is Kendrick Nunn. Built great value in his rookie season, then became a reserve in the run to the 2020 NBA Finals. Last season, same type of thing. Started most of the year. Goran Dragic took over in the playoffs. All of a sudden, Kendrick Nunn was left taking the taxpayer mid-level. His value wasn't the same. Look, the Heat are not going to prioritize the offseason at the cost of playoff success. But it is interesting that you and I, a month from the start of the playoffs, do have these questions.
No, it's been a concern all the way through, and I think that in the playoffs, you know, you make a great point, because if you do bench him and put him at 10th man, it's harder to trade a $95 million contract that
Sure.
way. It really is. And it's almost better to stick with him and just have the quicker hook for him instead. And that way it still
You're
has
trading a starter. That way you're moving
it
a
still has the
starter.
right optics, in
Yeah,
other
yeah.
words.
You're just doing that instead. That's a lot of money for someone to take on your 10th man. So, but there are so many players. I agree. If you and I were to do a list ranking, forget about starting a lineup, of the most important Heat players 1 to 10, I'm not so sure that Duncan Robinson right now doesn't slot in as low as 8 or 9 or even lower when you consider obviously what Tyler's bringing off the bench, obviously what Caleb Martin can produce for you off the bench, and even the Victor Oladipo, what he could be. The Markieff Morris, he's looked very good. He's had moments. He was helpful in that game against the Pistons. So it is interesting. By season's end, if we do the simple, this is not a draft. We're not saying who you need or who you want. But if you and I were to give the valuations as we begin our basketball season cards or whatever, I'm not so sure that Duncan Robinson wouldn't wind up 8, 9, or even 10. He has not been the value player that he had been in recent seasons. I think that's kind of undeniable, Big O.
All right, so let's have a little fun here, Ira, with Tyler Hero.
Okay.
And a question that is not for the now because the now has been answered. But let's just say that the now ends with one hell of a run in the playoffs. Maybe you get to the finals, maybe even win it.
Cool.
And then Tyler Hero gets a big ass contract.
Mm-hmm.
Does Tyler Hero stay in the Ginobili role? Or does Tyler Hero is there a thing that says, well, we gave him a new contract. Now we've got to elevate him to starter in 2022-2023 season because we're paying him a lot of money. And this guy's really, really good. So how do you see the future playing out for Tyler Hero? We know it's going to end up with a lot of money, and he deserves it. The kid has played out of his mind. But will the Heat then change the way they're playing Tyler Hero? Will they say, we need more Tyler Hero? Will they say, this kind of money requires you to be a starter?
The runway is set up for that, Big O. Again, for people not familiar, Tyler Hero by next October 31st, I think it is, might be a little earlier, can sign his rookie scale extension. However, he is already under contract for next season, 22-23, about $5.5, $6 million he's taken care of. So the runway is there. Let's say he gets a 4 or 5 year contract, fine, like Bam Adebayo did. That'll also come in the final year of Kyle Lowry's 3-year, $85 million contract. So there'll be one season there of overlap. Then assuming Kyle is done after 3 years at age 38, the runway is there. The other part of this equation, Big O, might be this. Jimmy Butler with his nagging little injuries. Might he revert to a 6-man type of role to at least during a regular season, Goran Dragic-like? And they got value out of Dragic in 2020. Let's face it, if he wasn't injured in those finals, the Heat could have been far more competitive against the Lakers. Instead, he had the foot injury, the plantar fascia, he couldn't play. You understood all of that. So I think the runway is there. You and I speak about sort of the transition and how they do have the young core of Bam Adebayo, how they do have the young core of Tyler Hero, and they have some other young players in the mix. So this might be a really nice mix where he can move to the Bam Tyler core from the Jimmy Kyle core, and it'll work out, and you get some younger reserves along the way. So I think the runway is there. Again, Tyler Hero's extension will begin in the 2023-24 season, the final year of Kyle Lowry's contract. And push comes to shove, and I'm not saying this and don't aggregate it, but Big O, if you want to tweet it out and get more follows, that's fine. And maybe Kyle Lowry doesn't make it through all 3 years of this contract. Maybe he becomes a lucrative expiring contract because Tyler Hero is so damn good. I already see what you're going to tweet out, Big O, that you can go in that direction. So right now, folks not listening or people now listening on the podcast, is Tyler Hero coming for Kyle Lowry's job? Live now on the Big O Show on your local podcast dealer. You happy now, Big O? You happy?
No, I'm just. It's. I mean, eventually you got to give him that money, and the kid deserves it. You got to.
Oh, he's going to get it. If not from the Heat,
no.
If the Heat come $1 less than max, his agent's going to go, you know what? We'll see you in free agency. Now, it's a risk he might get injured, and he's had some injuries, but I mean, he is boy wonder. all the people who had the questions about Tyler Hero. Remember Paul Pierce when he was doing his whole clown act on ESPN? He's not a bucket. Who's this guy? He thinks he's a bucket. What has he done? He's a bucket. He's become a bucket now. And he's also become, again, you and I will discuss this maybe sooner rather than later, but certainly before the playoffs. Who's the Heat closer? End of the game. Who do you want with the ball? You and I, Orlando Alzugaray, never would have said at the start of this year or November or December Tyler Hero. Now it's interesting. Now we're leaning that way.
I want perimeter. I want Tyler. If you're driving to the basket, I want Jimmy because obviously Jimmy's toughness and
here's what's interesting. Jimmy gets to the foul line. You're absolutely right. It slows the game down. It creates easy points. Tyler Hero's been getting to the foul line also. Tyler Hero is starting to do with opponents what they do to him. He gets them on his hip, and they're at his mercy. So he's turning around. He's flipping the script a little. Look, the big part of this is, and I just posted a story at sunsentinel.com about this, the Heat have the ability now to go with total closer defensive lineups. You have Bam, you have PJ Tucker, you have Oladipo, you have Caleb Martin, you have Kyle Lowry, you have Jimmy Butler, 6 options. But you're also going to need some scoring. The problem with Tyler as closer is, of course, every team on the other way down, they will pick and roll with either Kyrie Irving on him or Kevin Durant on him and take advantage of the matchup. So Kyler's going to have to elevate that a little bit to be playing closing time because closing time is two-way time. Bam can only help so much. This team takes charges. This team does not block shots. You don't have that second-line defender. You don't have Rudy Gobert standing behind Tyler Hero. That's the next step. Could he upgrade the defense at least to marginal, nominal, average, mediocre level? Then you'll feel a little more comfortable. The NBA only allows 2 timeouts per teams in the last 2 minutes. So this whole notion of they should offense, defense, not that easy if there aren't a lot of whistles for fouls.
Yeah, we don't even have Alan Ogg back there. Anyway, follow him on Twitter at Ira Heatbeat and catch his work at the South Florida Sun Sentinel and catch him 3 times a week here doing his thing. Obviously with the Acura Pembroke Pines, Miami Heat and NBA reports. And then on Wednesdays with the Slomins Inside the Paint Show with Clay Ferraro. Ira, thank you, my friend. Enjoy the basketball. We will catch up next week.
I'm enjoying the time off. I'll be rushing to shoot around on Monday when I talk to you in Philly. It's going to get a little busy, so enjoy the time now. Thank you, Big O.
You got it, baby. Be good. There you go. The great Ira Winderman joining us there. Love it. All right. Heat back in action tonight against the Thunder at the FTX Arena. Thunder, by the way, are 11-23 on the road. That's not good.
This is the Big O Show. This is the Big O Show.